It's a familiar threat we face every single year. Wildfires ripping across the American West.
But you've worried about wildfire before.
Oh yeah. Yeah, after seeing, the fires in LA and everything and how devastating it can just destroy a whole neighborhood in a heartbeat.
And 2025 is no different. As we brace for yet another challenging wildfire season, what can be done so history doesn't repeat itself?
I think the new normal is hotter and drier. I think what's scary is the new normal actually may be drier than what we're experiencing today.
We're on your side, tracking everything from preparedness.
I think the reality is everyone needs to use less water. Right now, we're using more water than Mother Nature's providing us.
To lessons learned, to prevention and possible solutions, like the first fire-resistant neighborhood in the U.S.
There's no open eaves, and then the vents are all the fire-resistant 1/8-inch mesh, which prevents embers from going into the vent structures.
Oregon Under Fire starts now.
Well, thank you for joining us here for our wildfire special, Oregon Under Fire. I'm John Mayer. Now, the burn scars scattered across the landscape, telling a story. The West certainly no stranger to disastrous wildfires. Seasons getting longer, hotter, starting earlier. The word wildfire typically implying a fire happens in the wild, removed from most population centers. But across the West, emergency leaders increasingly warning about a newer kind of battle. As Lincoln Graves with our sister station KUTV in Salt Lake City explains, urban fires threaten our cities too.
Across the American West, more and more urban city dwellers are thinking about fire danger.
The first year we were here, I was like,
It's crossed Marie Riker's mind,
well, maybe a little bit in the summertime when all the green weeds turn brown.
as well as the mind of her neighbor,
About 28 years.
Randy Hansen.
These weeds here on the hillside here just start to get out of hand.
Marie and Randy don't live in typical wildfire country. A suburban Salt Lake City neighborhood, far from deep forests or rugged hillsides. A major freeway 100 yards away. But across the street, the Jordan River Parkway. A peaceful, tranquil place most of the time, but where vegetation can dry out and become fuel for wildfires.
You live in the middle of the valley, basically, right? You're far from the mountains.
Right.
But you've worried about wildfire before.
Oh yeah. Yeah, after seeing, the fires in LA and everything and how devastating it can just destroy a whole neighborhood in a heartbeat.
The Los Angeles wildfires are the most recent example of how flames can race through urban neighborhoods. At least 30 people were killed. More than 18,000 structures, mostly homes, were burned. A year and a half earlier, a wildfire destroyed Lahaina, Hawaii, killing more than 100. And a year and a half before that, the Marshall Fire roared across neighborhoods near Boulder, Colorado, killing 2 and burning more than 1,000 homes. All these fires started as wildfires, which then moved toward neighborhoods.
But then it moves into something that is very different, and that is that structure-to-structure ignition.
Brent Olson is Division Chief of Wildland Operations for Clackamas Fire, a department in suburban Portland, Oregon. His agency very nearly had a worst-case scenario in the fall of 2020, when historic wildfires came close to major population centers. 500,000 people were under some level of evacuation order.
We really didn't think it could happen to us, and it did.
Olson says that if fires reach urban areas, spread by extreme conditions, everything changes.
And at that point, I no longer term it a wildfire and what we traditionally think of as trees and brush and things of that nature. It really morphs into that more closely aligns with an urban conflagration.
Crews are somewhat powerless when a fire reaches that point, but that doesn't mean urban areas aren't trying to prepare. The 2020 fires led Olson's agency to create a 20-person Type 2 strike team. It was the first such wildland hand crew set up by a structural fire department in Oregon.
We've just onboarded and started their initial training for the 2025 season.
Elsewhere in the West, like Las Vegas and its hot desert climate, vegetation fires are somewhat less common. That is unless extremely wet years lead to a bumper grass crop, which later become tinder dry fuel. In those years, Vegas area departments will zero in on prevention and preparation.
We see the trends with us. When we have grass years, we want to be a little bit more protective of what we have going on. We want to push prevention more. We want to say, hey, don't be going out there doing your illegal fireworks.
Some cities now have wildland-specific fire stations. This is one in the Avenues neighborhood of Salt Lake City, with different types of engines to access rugged terrain.
And then we have a Type 3 that's housed at one of our wildland stations that is meant for wildland apparatus, and also Type 6s for wildland apparatus, so that we can get into those more difficult terrain areas.
Many lines of defense to stop an urban conflagration, but the last line of defense might just be homeowners themselves. While Marie loves living across from the river, she has occasionally wondered if bad behavior might prove disastrous.
We get a lot of walkers through here, and I guess if somebody's smoking and drops their cigarette, I guess it could be.
Started burning up that way.
Randy worries much more. As river vegetation grows and dries out, he takes matters into his own hands.
I get over there with my own private lawnmower and personal lawnmower and take it down, cut it down, just try to clean it up.
A last stand effort to stop a wildfire from spreading to his home and the homes of his neighbors.
Keep an eye on it, because we could be in the same boat LA was. You just never know.
I'm Lincoln Graves reporting.
Now, firefighters were certainly put to the test across Oregon last year as well. And this year, officials warning upcoming season shaping up to be eerily similar to what we saw a year ago. The state saw a record 1.9 million acres burned in 2024. That is roughly 3 times the state's 10-year average. At least 42 homes and 132 other buildings were destroyed. And Oregon Governor Tina Kotek invoked the Emergency Conflagration Act a record 17 times, mobilizing resources, the costs exceeding $350 million. Now, an extended drought across the southwestern United States exacerbating wildfire season. As Dana Wagner reports from our sister station in Las Vegas, that could get even worse.
There was a time not that long ago that Lake Mead near Las Vegas and Lake Powell in southern Utah were full. Plenty of water for 40 million people in 7 states along the Colorado River. Well, those days are long gone, as I documented some 20 years ago in this report from Hoover Dam.
To give you an idea of the depth of the problem, we came out here to Lake Mead about 4 years ago. I could have reached over this wall here at Hoover Dam, just about touched the top of the lake. Look at it now.
Our drought that we're in today has been going on for about 25 years.
Colby Pellegrino with the Southern Nevada Water Authority doesn't think it's going to get any better anytime soon. In fact, she thinks it'll get even worse moving forward.
I think the new normal is hotter and drier. I think what's scary is the new normal actually may be drier than what we're experiencing today.
Just to orient you a little bit, Lake Powell sits on the state line in between Utah and Arizona. Lake Mead sits on the state line between Nevada and northwestern Arizona, and their two are connected by the Colorado River, which runs about 300 miles between the two reservoirs right through the Grand Canyon. All of that water, at least most of it, comes from snowmelt on the western slopes of the Rocky Mountains located to the west of Denver. There are about 40 million Americans that rely on the Colorado River for their main water source. Right now, Lake Powell sits at 31% capacity. Lake Mead is at 32% capacity. In fact, over the last 2.5 decades of drought, Lake Mead has fallen about 140 feet.
In addition to providing water to grow crops, among other things, the Colorado River provides drinking water for Denver, Salt Lake City, Los Angeles, San Diego, Phoenix, and 90% of the drinking water for Las Vegas. Arizona and Nevada have been forced to take less water from the two lakes because of a shortage on the river declared by the federal government 4 years ago. And realizing the dire nature of the situation, California is also cutting back on consumption on a voluntary basis.
I think the reality is everyone needs to use less water. Right now, we're using more water than Mother Nature's providing us.
Days ago, the National Weather Service predicted runoff into the Colorado River will amount to about 55% of an average year, much lower than their previous estimate. So there's little doubt that the levels of Lake Powell and Lake Mead will go down even further this summer. In Las Vegas, I'm Dana Wagner reporting.
Well, still to come here on Oregon Under Fire. Of course, we are no strangers to drought conditions here across the state as well. We'll break down where things stand as we head towards wildfire season. That's up next after the break.
And now weather with Chief Meteorologist John Mayer.
Well, as we continue to rapidly approach wildfire season, one of the big concerns that we're always keeping tabs on, exactly where the drought monitor currently stands. And our latest update coming in this week showing that, well, at least so far, we're being spared of any of that drought. That light yellow color sort of indicating the pre-drought. We're beginning to dry up, but we're still not at the point where we're seeing any widespread drought. What would that look like? Well, let me take you back the past couple of years, skipping back to 2023. See all this tan, all this orange east of the Cascades. That's where we start to get into moderate to severe drought. These are where we really start to run into some cause for concern, but nothing can top what we saw just a few years back, 2022, widespread exceptional drought. That is the most extreme drought category. We saw plenty of it across the central part of the state. Now, unfortunately, while we're not necessarily seeing much of this drought, it still doesn't mean we're completely in the clear. It just means we've got a better chance to at least avoid some of that more widespread fuel. The less that we see in terms of combustible fuels, the better off we are heading into wildfire season. Let me take you back to 2020 because this right here was a massively impactful year for us. Again, we're talking the same time of year, but just taking you back by 5 years. This is when we saw Holiday Farm Fire, the Archie Creek Fire, and we were in a much worse situation here across Western Oregon, anywhere from severe to extreme drought here in our backyard. Now, thankfully, that is not the case for us this year, but remember, 2024 saw the most acreage burned across the entire state of Oregon, and we were nearly drought-free at this time of year. So it's not as if that's a one-to-one situation. One of the other big factors moving forward going to be our summer temperature outlook, and one thing that we know, it is going to get hot out there. We're expecting well above average temperatures across, well, the entire western half of the country. We're really seeing that bullseye setting up over Utah, Nevada, southern Idaho. Still, we are expecting that warmer weather here in our backyard and drier weather as well, and that's not a good combination. If we continue to head on this pathway, there's a good chance that that drought monitor looks worse for the wear, and that's where we start to run into more and more of those concerns when it comes to potential worse wildfire season here in the upcoming months. One factor oftentimes gets overlooked as we head into the summer. Where do we stand with our snowpack in the mountains? That still plays a huge role even as we start to get further and further removed from the winter season. We're going to take a closer dive into that, see exactly where things stand, and if that could help us to beat some of that drier weather that is expected here as we move into the summer. All that coming up in just a bit. But also coming up, creating defensible space. That can make all the difference when it comes to protecting your home. But one builder going even further. We'll have a look inside the country's first fire-resistant neighborhood. Welcome back. Well, as we stare down what could be another severe wildfire season, preparing your home could make all the difference. Oregon State Fire Marshal saying creating defensible space around your home is one of the most effective ways to not only protect your property, but also the community. Here's a few actions homeowners can take right now. Space and prune your trees. Prevent any fire from being able to climb into the canopies. Remove leaves, pine needles, bark, mulch, or any other debris within 100 feet of structures or up to your property line. Clean off those roofs and keep the gutters cleared, and keep plants trimmed and clear of any dead materials, especially near the house, and move combustible material like firewood away from the home. Also avoid planting anything directly under eaves, and you should always aim for a 5-foot buffer. And probably clearing dry brush and grass from your property, always a good first step in protecting your home. But one builder in San Diego County taking things up a notch. They're creating the country's first fire-resistant neighborhood. Liz Gonzalez with our sister station, Fox 26 in Fresno, reports.
Watch this test in a research chamber as embers fly towards a home. 4 minutes in, and the mulch on the left side is starting to smolder. 8 minutes in, there are now flames, and by the 12-minute mark, those flames have spread to the porch, while the right side remains virtually untouched. The difference? It's following standards developed by the nonprofit Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, or IBHS.
Their program takes that to a little bit of a different level.
Steve Ruffner is the president of KB Home Coastal, the company behind the country's first fire-resistant and fire-prepared neighborhood in Escondido.
We are building in a very high fire zone because we're at the foot of a mountain, or basically a hillside in San Diego County.
But all 64 homes in the Dixon Trails neighborhood are designed to protect against direct flame contact, radiant heat, and embers. They feature Class A fire-rated roofs, non-combustible gutters, upgraded windows and doors, and ember and flame-resistant vents.
And then the eaves are stuccoed so that embers can't get up into the attic. So there's no open eaves. And then the vents are all the fire-resistant 1/8-inch mesh, which prevents embers from going into the vent structures.
They also feature fences made out of metal instead of wood, which can catch fire, and a 5-foot buffer zone around the home.
IDHS found in the fires that were recent in LA that was a big problem, is that, vegetation and ignition points around the house were really difficult to control.
Ruffner says taking these measures from the onset of construction is a game changer compared to doing it to an older home.
This is kind of a project we like to be an innovator. So far, our customers are really pleased with it. They really feel safer.
Now, the median home price in Escondido is around $1 million. Fireproof homes going for just a touch more than that. Dixon Trails already a certified wildfire-prepared community. Having that certification could be used by some insurers for discounts. Also be a big selling point once owners try to sell those homes. And still to come here on Oregon Under Fire, it's not just land being destroyed by fires, it's also putting people's health at risk. Why our region is a spotlight of concern for the American Lung Association. That's up next. Welcome back. While we can never say for certain exactly what will happen this fire season, we do know fire seasons across the Pacific Northwest burning longer and impacting more people. They can have big consequences on your health. Now, wildfires burn more than simply trees and grass. Burned cars, structures, those release toxic chemicals. Wildfires also contributing to harmful fine particle pollution. Recent reports from the American Lung Association listing cities in Oregon, including Eugene, Springfield, Medford, as having some of the worst air quality when measured by daily particulate matter across the country. Wildfires can even impact the mental health, as studies showing people personally affected by wildfires more likely to have anxiety, depression, and PTSD than those who were not. And if a wildfire does spark in your area this season, it's always critical you have a plan. 3 types of evacuation levels. First off, be ready. Check emergency service websites and your local newscasts and be prepared to move vulnerable people, belongings, and pets. At level 2, that's be set. Be ready to leave at a moment's notice. Consider a shelter or staying with others outside the area. Monitor emergency alerts. And then level 3, that is go now. At that point, you need to evacuate immediately. So how are things setting up heading into wildfire season? Well, we just saw the drought monitor looking okay. Of course, the temperature, precipitation outlook not great. But this right here is one of the lesser thought of issues heading into the summer season, snowpack. And right now, it is very much a mixed bag. The Willamette way down. However, down to the south, the Rogue, the Umpqua basins actually above average for this time of year. So we're starting to see this split decision. Unfortunately, this does mean we're likely going to have a little less moisture making its way down into the soil as we continue heading deeper into the summer season, especially here in the Willamette and the Deschutes Basin. That's bad news for us. However, the above average snowpack down to the south, that could be good. Ultimately, you put all this together, and all we can ever tell you is our likelihood for a worse wildfire season. Some of those factors not looking good, but others playing in our favor. Ultimately, this does look very similar to how things were setting up 1 year ago. So, of course, we will continue to keep you up to date on all the latest anytime a wildfire sparks up. Be sure to stick with us. We'll make sure to keep you updated and keep you safe. Thank you for joining us here for this special presentation, Oregon Under Fire. And of course, stick with NBC16 for all of your wildfire coverage throughout the rest of the season. Thanks for watching. Of course, have a great night.